welcome to this session. We're standing between you and lunch, so that's always a tricky one, although probably after lunch is even more tricky. I'm very, very honored to have this panel here not up because we're down from you. It's a bit of a distance thing, so don't feel like that should hold you back to ask questions, raise your hand. We are a small enough group to work that. I have a clicker, which I'm gonna click, and actually it went to the next slide already, magically. Welcome here. We're gonna do a small intro. So how's it gonna work? We're gonna do a brief intro, which is not gonna do justice to the amazing people we have on the panel, because they all have more than enough experience, thoughts, and work to share for an hour and a half, and we're not gonna do that because we have 4. So we're gonna cut off. You're gonna find them for lunch as well. I think everybody joins for lunch. So if you need to go deeper, etc., use that time later. I'm Koen van Seijen. I'm your host and moderator today. We also run a podcast focused on investing in regenerative food and agriculture, not because I think investing is the most important thing in the world, but it's an enormous resource. Finance is an enormous tool that we haven't been using in the regenerative food and agriculture space enough. We started 10 years ago. I started following the space about 15 years ago, and we've had the great pleasure to interview, actually a number of them, amazing people here on the panel over the last years. We did about 450 episodes with scientists, farmers, investors, fund managers, food companies, entrepreneurs in general, to discuss and discover the role of finance and money in the transition. And yeah, that kept us busy for 10 years and probably for another 10. And gets us to places like this where I get to share, ask the questions, and do the slides. But I'm not doing the hard work here, which are definitely the people on my left, specifically the farmers. We always love to have, of course, real boots on the ground here, because it just gives such a different, no bullshit perspective on many things that we always love to discuss around farmers without farmers in the room. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to, let's see the slides. I think farmer first, or Kellyanne, or are we going to go to each last? Let's go to Kellyanne first. You can choose which mic you want to do. We have the fancy one here or the one in my hand. I think that one also works. If you click, yes, let's test.
Does it work? Yeah, okay, you can hear me. So Kellyanne Ross, I'm not the farmer in the room, but I did grow up on a farm in Nova Scotia, Canada, on a dairy farm. Started my work in agriculture at Syngenta. I was 7.5 years there. That's how I got into carbon farming. I think Indigo Ag had launched their carbon farming program, and everybody, all the corporates had FOMO, and they were like, oh, we need to launch something for our farmers too. And so we looked into the business model of how we can support farmers with carbon farming, and what we found was that they couldn't make any money because the MRV costs were too high, and the intermediaries were maybe taking a lot of the money. And so ultimately we said, okay, well, let's pilot this, let's test this, and that's how I met Ish, actually, is looking at solutions for MRV. We called it machine learning at the time, but now it's AI.
You remember when it was called machine learning and not raising billions and billions with just a deck? Now it's called AI, but it was the same.
And then, yeah, so Syngenta never launched a program, and I then said, okay, well, who's buying these carbon farming benefits? Who are the off-takers of these benefits? So moved to the value chain. First, Barry Callebaut, which is a large chocolate manufacturing company. They own like 25% of the global market. And my title was Carbon Project Manager. So there was an evolution in the titles in these corporates. And my title ultimately evolved to carbon lead, global carbon lead, and that's because we decided as a value chain we didn't want offsets anymore. We wanted insets in the supply chain. We wanted to reduce our supply chain rather than buying offsets from somewhere else. I didn't get an increase in pay, but I did get a title change. Ultimately then moved to Kraft Heinz as an independent, as the global head of net zero. So again, a new title, and that was looking at how do we decrease carbon in our value chain. So that was really developing strategies, getting CEOs to make sure their incentives were tied to the performance of carbon in the value chain. And so that has led me ultimately to today, where I'm working on the OGCR project, which Itch will introduce.
Perfect, thank you. let's do Matteo briefly, and John, because you both have pictures and slides after, which makes it more visual, but just to complete the cycle, then we go to Ish, and then we'll come back to some beautiful pictures and some stories on, that makes us, let's say, feel, sense, hear. We're going to ask you to close your eyes, things like that, just to bring you to a few farms, one nearby and one far away. But brief introduction, Matteo, what brings you here? I mean, I know the car, but in general, what brings you to this panel?
Thanks, Kun. Basically, I'm into agriculture and ecology since I was born, I think. At 6 years old, I was reading John Samos' book on self-sufficiency and looking at the pictures, which were very beautiful. I started to study agriculture formally at the agricultural high school here in Italy at 14 years old. And then I followed studying, continuing my research around the world for 9 years, working different farms and following different projects all over Europe and beyond. And then I started a farm when I came back to Italy in 2008 or 2009, and then back again for some times around, and then I started a new farm, which is Easy the Farm, with my partner Paola, which today is what we call how to say, a social ecosystem and also an agroecological experimental farm, which is working from ecological and economical and social point of view. And well, I'm totally interested in anything concerning from ecology on. And I also I am a consultant and educator, especially around Italy. I was coordinating the EIT food consultancy and the education program for the last 5 years. So we have been training lots of farmers, and we have been consulting quite a bit of them for free, reaching quite nice results. So yeah, I would say that I'm a diversified ecosystem.
Thanks so much. And John, you want to briefly, we have some slides obviously from your farm as well, but just a brief intro as we complete the panel.
So I'm John Gilliland. I'm a 5th generation farmer from the border of Ireland and Northern Ireland in the city of Derry. I farm willow trees and cattle, just to be slightly different. My other part of my day job, I chair one of the old EIP operational groups that the European Commission set up called ARC0, taking 8 farms on a journey towards net zero. I'm Professor of Practice at Queen's University Belfast. I advise the UK levy boards on measuring, reporting and verifying landscapes, and I'm a former member of the EU Soil Mission. And great to see the mission board so well articulated this morning. Thank you.
And then over to Ish, who doesn't need, I mean, maybe needs an introduction, maybe not, but definitely the queen of remote sensing, I think is a fair.
Oh, that's very generous.
We probably called you like that.
All right, hello everyone. My name's Ishani Wheeler. Usually people call me Ish. Who am I? I'm a soil and water scientist. I come from Australia originally. I've been in Netherlands long enough to speak much better Dutch than I do. And I did my doctorate a long time ago in development of the Australian direct measurement protocol. So I was writing MRVs in like 2009. And fast forward a long way, I'm the research coordinator of Open GeoHub Foundation. Our focus is essentially on open source software, open access data, which others have better named democratizing MRV. I like this one, everyone sort of gets that makes sense. And yeah, we are, just to give you a heads up, we are actively studying you in this room, so this will be a very interactive session. And a little background on, I am, yeah, also the coordinator of the Intergenerational Open Geospatial Carbon Registry, which is a mouthful, so we call it OGCR. And this project came out as a swan song, essentially, when I saw the call come up of, you know, with good benefits and like a system that I wished we could have achieved in Australia. Then I went, okay, well, if Europe's serious, let's try. Here you go. Here are the coolest people that I know who could really work on this. Let's go. With no expectation. I was a bit tired of carbon. I wanted to be free. But here we are. The world decided differently. So can we go to the first slide, please? Yes. Great. So I have 2 slides, and that's it, okay? So the most important thing, we already have updatable pan-EU geospatial layers. We've been doing these updates with countries, and now we're bringing it down to company, farm level, et cetera. There's a huge amount of scientific questions, ethical questions, lots of questions. We're going to focus on more of the ethical, social side today, okay? There'll be other times when we can focus on the science. So these layers already exist. They are, in our opinion, this is soil carbon, some are in Indonesia that you're looking at. In our opinion, they are good enough for land cover change, right, from one extreme to another, but they are not yet good enough for within land management change. So to detect these gentlemen to my right? That's kind of the purpose of this project, is try and push it forward further. So there's a bunch of hybrid machine learning stuff for simulating scenarios, and that's lovely. But today we're going to focus on globally applicable open geospatial carbon registry and surrounding software. It's not just registry module, there's another 4 or 5 modules around it to how do we get all these pieces to talk. And they're all going to be developed, they are all developed in open source, so anyone will be able to use them, sort of lift the level up. Okay? Next slide. Right, so as I alluded to, you're in a study, by the way.
Anonymous, obviously. Anonymous, yeah.
Sorry?
Anonymous, obviously.
Anonymous, yes. You're in an anonymous study. We will be repeating this kind of assessment in many different arenas. This is the first time, so any feedback you have after, please let us know. So we know GCR, I mean, you should all know the FAIR principles. This is standard, it should be in all of your projects, I imagine. But we added to that what's called the CARE principles. And these come from GIDA, so this is the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. And the reason that we've added these principles, this is the second project we've added it to, is that essentially we see a lot of issues when we work with data and software, that how do we solve these issues? How do we make choices in our development whilst being aware of these other items, right? So very quickly, collective benefits, authority to control, responsibility, ethics. These are the questions we asked ourselves when we were writing the proposal. Yay, now we're here, very cool, now we have to execute. So now we test our assumptions. Are our assumptions, what does everyone else think? Because we have to make them at that point, but now we stress test. So as I said, socio-technical project, and the answers that you give, we will take them and they will inform the way we design the software. Okay, so one more slide. Please get out your phones.
This is the moment.
If you wish
and so
to be
just
studied.
to be, because it will inform in a way that basically when Ish and the team wrote the proposal, of course it's a couple of years ago, and many things happen in this space, and as the project comes along and is getting developed, like we need to make sure it's up to date, and up to date with the latest things. So fill out the first question. You can join through the QR code. There's no active poll yet. Can we put the active poll up? I'm looking at the tech in the back. We're working on it. So we did the first bit.
It works.
Now it's up, yeah. We just like to know who's in the room. Like what brings you here. You can have multiple hats, obviously, but take the principal one. And within this page, we'll keep as Slido's work. We haven't managed to integrate them yet into slides, so we're going to go back and forth later on with results. So bear with us with some tab changes, but that will be happening in the back, which we're very thankful for. And so I can actually see the results. Perfect. So we have research mostly, farmer, land manager, MRV, data tech. Of course, people picked their main hat. Finance investor, very interesting as well. Policy and private citizen. Amazing. So quite a diverse group, actually, Ish. I can see but quite a lot of research and NGO. Now, as we're getting ourselves ready for, let's say, thinking about co-benefits. So let's get out of the carbon funnel. the tunnel vision for a moment, or the funnel or tunnel, I mean, both. We're going to see a few beautiful pictures and some papers of the two gentlemen sitting on my left, who actually bring the farming side of things. And this is an old picture I recognize. This is just for people. I'm going to ask Matteo to briefly walk us through. We have 2 or 3, 5 pictures maybe on the farm. This is an older one because I recognize the buildings are in a different place. Yeah, there it is. And so for anybody that hasn't had the great pleasure to be on the farm, this is 2 hours from here, amazing view, which we don't have a picture of. If you ever have the chance to visit and spend some time with Matteo walking the land, which I've been very fortunate to have, definitely do. You will learn a lot, you will see a lot, but I just want to point out an interesting, I don't know, even, can I do the laser? Yes. This is the neighbor's land. Okay, just see the difference. And this is another neighbor. So just with that, this is the neighbor's land. Yeah, we're looking at the same slide, but we cannot see it up there. Just with that, Matteo, walk us through a bit what, when you found it, when you bought it, the differences, the sounds, the smells, the food. Obviously, you have a whole walkway filled with kiwis, which you can literally take from the ceiling. You have a few pictures. You can click through it if you want, just to bring us in a couple of minutes to the land, so we're out of this nicely done room, but definitely not super connected to where we are, or where we should be talking about. So bring us to Easy to Farm, Iseo.
Thank you. So first of all, sorry for my English in advance. It's not the best of the English, so I hope you will understand. First of all, when we got there 10 years ago, it was not a barren land. It was not a desert. There was already a beautiful pasture land with olive trees and covered soil, and not a very good soil, but not the worst of the soils. The land was managed, is around now, we reach around 10 hectares with the rented land. At the beginning was 6 hectares, and this land was managed just by one person, a 70-year-old farmer, retired, managing it maybe part-time, 2-3 months a year. Today we are 6 people. We started a farm company. We have lots of people passing by as internships, volunteers, doing researches, theses, and so on. And so from the social ecosystem point of view, it got much richer. Because we can pay different, let's say, wages. We have the money to reinvest in the farm. We diversified the farm in a quite wide and broad way. Maybe if there will be time later, I can tell more about it. So more people that live off the land and manages the land, it means to have a higher control and also to get deeper when you're speaking about ecosystem services, diversification, resilience, adaptation, and the capacity of being always ready to interact with changes in a productive and functional and regenerative way when it's possible. When we started on the first gardens, basically the laser here, first gardens were here. From soil analysis, we started from 2.4% organic matter. And last year with Lilas for Soil, one of the programs, they came to take some samples, Caterina. And basically we reached where we farm vegetables, 7% organic matter and 8% where we have apple trees and agroforestry lines. So quite interesting from the point of view. The soundscape is interesting because there are more birds, there are more insects. In these 10 years, we had different theses and researches going on that showed different ecological aspect that has been progressively increasing and consolidating in certain cases. We now have, for example, some niches that before we didn't have, where toads, frogs, and different insects that were not present before, now they are thriving and reproducing and so on. So the farm is quite diversified. We like to experiment, not just to get to our CSA members, restaurants, and our market, but also to provide an idea of what crops could be grown in our area with certain approaches and certain practices. So we experiment a lot. When something doesn't work, we change it, and if it really doesn't work, we leave it for the moment. So, yeah. Sorry. So these are some of the ideas. We have 13 different agro-silvopastoral systems that we are testing and experimenting with. Actually, there are more, but let's say if we really have to speak about system, I would say 13 different systems. In the picture, you see on the left side a simple system with pasture where we graze our sheep, and then we have a succession with donkeys, and then the chickens after the donkeys. So we really manage the land, moving the animals 6-7 times a day when it's possible, mimicking the behavior of natural herds, and the pasture, they became much abundant from quality and quantity point of view in few years, thanks to
just to emphasize, for everybody that doesn't go deep in holistic grazing, let's say 6-7 times a day is a lot. Like from a management perspective, that's a lot of work, but it also results in a lot. I think we get happy if animals are moved once or twice. That's already asking, and Matteo, of course, brings it, and the team brings it to a whole different level, but you see the result in terms of soil and in terms of, but it requires a lot of management.
Yeah, from one side, yes, but we could speak about this if we had more time. So we have the pasture with the animal managing it. The chickens, they are allowed to graze under the fruit trees because they eat the rotten fruits, they eat the insects, so they allow the fruit system not to have a high pressure of certain pests. Let's say like this, and they transform it into protein in eggs. We have a line of fig trees in our farm. For example, we have 25 varieties of fig trees. We have I think now we have 32 varieties of apples. We have many varieties of table grapes. And for every single crop, we wanted to experiment the most appropriate crops for that area. Because we don't want to use pesticides, we don't want to use too many inputs, and in this way, genetics, variability, diversity allow us to do so. And then we have an emergent layer with cold-resistant eucalyptuses that we use for different purposes, and that protects figs, sorry, from the overheat during summer. On the right side, I will speed up, we have different layers. We have vegetables. You can see the soil cover of these no-till market gardens. And then on the right side, under the trees, we have some comfrey, a hybrid comfrey that we use to pump nutrients from the deeper soil and use it as a fertilizer for our crops. And then we have a layer of commercial apples, and then Paulownia trees that we are using, hybrid Paulownia trees that we are using mainly as a fodder for our animals. They are super high in sugars, nice quantity of protein, as well as super high digestibility for the animals. And also they protect us from summer hails, overheat, and many other potential problems such as storms and so on. Okay, perfect. So I'll be faster. You can see the animals there interacting with some fodder, alternative fodder lines that normally we don't give them access, but we cut the fodder in order to, let's say, give the animals what they can't get from the pasture. There we have planted, just last year, I think, it was 1,700 new trees, but I think just of mulberries, we reached 1,200 trees, because the mulberry reaches 24% of protein. It's free protein that doesn't have to come from very far away. And it's super rich in nutrients. And it grows 3 times a year if you cut it. So it's a sort of free technology. You can see our sheep under the table grape lines, which are a little bit complex, and I'll show you later. And we use animals instead of flail mowers, instead of machinery that would decrease the insect biodiversity and would kill many animals without really making a good use of that biomass. To finish, you see on the left side the grape line, as you have seen before during winter, is a 3-layer system with alder trees on the top, which are nitrogen fixing, so they fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and they release it to the environment if they are pruned and fed to the animal. And then we have the grape, of course, on the trellises is a table grape, a high-value crop, and below the table grape we have josta berries, which are also a high-value crop. On the right side we have apples, alternated with honey locust trees that I selected from Sicily, which produce edible pods for animals, super rich in sugars, proteins, and tannins and biocompounds that they are very good for the animals in order to get rid of parasites. And in between the crops, of course, we manage it with all the animals that I was telling you. Sorry for taking so long.
Amazing. And just to double click, what's I think interesting here is it's first of all, it has to be managed commercially. The land prices and are very interesting. I'll invite you to talk later to Matteo if you think that land is expensive where you are. But it's also, this is an experimentation farm in that sense. Like, if you remember the first picture and see what the neighbors are doing, Matteo and Paola didn't have anybody else to look at and say, okay, what can happen here if I want to manage it differently? So what we see, and we visited many of the leading regenerative farmers, are also running a lot of trials. They're basically, and one of the co-benefits is of having these people against all odds and against the subsidy system and against a lot of other systems that we've created, is experiment a lot that then the neighbors can more easily step into, because somebody already selected the right hybrid Polonia that works in that area, because nobody did that before. Somebody has selected the right chickens variety. Somebody has figured out what are 6 times movements or 5 times, etc. So just to put a mental map on, like, a lot of these pioneers you see are actually research and development as well. And we should treat them like that. And we should figure out ways of how to have a sort of overflow effect to the neighbors. And you see that from satellite. You can see leading regen farms, you can see leading organic ones to sort of start, start copying, that's not the right word, start overflowing. And of course, it's not that it's Matteo's job to necessarily teach the neighbors or help the neighbors, but they do. And so there's an interesting dynamic there between the pioneers and the land around. And I think, and I know that with John that's similar, so we're going to move to a very different, it looks equally green, but it's a very different geography on the British Isles. Walk us through literally where you are and what we see, and a very different history. You have the clicker, so you can move through the slides by yourself.
So thank you very much. So moving from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic, just to put this into context, this is my family home. I'm the 5th generation here. The hills and the background there are the Republic of Ireland, and I'm in the Northern Ireland, so I'm right on the border. What you can see in our landscape, and it's really interesting, both us as farmers have trees integrated in the food-producing landscape. And we certainly, as we prepare our landscape for our changing climate, we see trees playing a bigger role, but with food production integrated throughout them. What's unique in our farm is over the 5 generations of Gillilands, and there's a 6th and a 7th generation already there, is that we have 5 totally different land uses on our farm. So you can see down at the bottom there, we have some 250-year-old deciduous woodland. We have 30-year-old deciduous woodland I planted when I graduated. We have 120-year-old silver pasture, that's trees and grass in the same place. We have 30 years of short rotation willow coppice, and we've got 200-year-old straight grazing grounds. So 5 totally different land uses on the same soil type. We are surrounded by Northern Ireland's 2nd city, the city of Derry, and one of the key things that my son is now doing is we've created a community interest company to actually engage with society about telling our story. Most farms don't spend enough time, most of the industry don't spend enough time actually telling our story. And for us, we decided to put a framework around that. And the great thing about a community interest company, it's a not-for-profit, and it allows us to source funding to help us that we as a private organization would not be able to do. As was explained, most regenerative farmers are innovators in their own right. And so we've been doing a different piece of work. We've been doing it with Queen's University Belfast, with the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute and the Foyle Food Group. And we actually have been using leaf from willows as tree fodder for livestock. And we've been doing it now for 4 years with a PhD student who's just graduated from Queen's University. And we got our work published in Nature Science articles with a 27% reduction of methane from belching cows, of actually using what are condensed tannins in the leaf to actually modify the rumen inside the animal. So what you can see in this photograph on the left is one of our very happy Aberdeen Angus dairy cross animals. The middle picture is of a thing called a green feed unit. So that's us physically measuring methane emissions from animals in the field. And then on the right-hand side, you can see strip grazing, where we mob graze the willows in strips and move them across as such. And in this, we are absolutely leading in how a farm landscape can produce multiple public goods from the same system and not just a single carbon dimensional journey. We like to back it with science. It's one of the reasons why I was a member of the Soil Mission Board, is what does the data? Can the data back up our journey as such? We spent a lot of time on our farm measuring soils, measure them at depth. So we measure our soil organic carbon to what we call the sea horizon. On my farms, roughly about 80 centimeters. We measure soil texture classification. But we're particularly looking at what is the consequence of different land uses on the same soil type. And actually, if you look at the bar chart on the right-hand side, if I park the willows a moment, both my grassland and my 250-year-old, my 30-year-old woodland statistically are exactly the same. But what is really interesting, the role of agroforestry or silvopasture, where you've got a diversity of plant species, where you've got grasses with short roots, herbs and legumes with longer roots, trees with even longer roots again. And they all are photosynthesizing, they all are issuing root exudate, and we are able to get far greater carbon stocks in our soil than we would if we stayed with a monoculture. And just to put, again, some data around that, the company we use actually stratifies our soil depth. So we measure carbon at 15 centimeters, 30 centimeters, 60 centimeters, and at a meter deep where we can get it. Each of those lines is a different land use, but you can see at 30 centimeters, there are two there, the blue and the purple, where we have far more carbon in that 15 to 60 centimeters. And that blue and that purple are our silvopasture and our willows. And you can really see where we're pushing our soil organic carbon, not in the top 15 centimeters, but right down to 60 centimeters. And even right down at a meter deep, you are seeing, some land uses have twice as much soil organic carbon, even down at a meter deep. So really putting the data behind different land uses and how we can actually show our journey as such on this. So.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you so much. I hope that sets the context of what we're talking about for co-benefits. And so now we're going to go through a set of assumptions. Please get your phones out. That Slido will go
This is your Slido moment.
To the next question.
So there's a number of assumptions, and they're connected with questions. So.
Yeah. So I will read out the assumption because it's on the slide. So our first assumption was essentially that more agroecosystem carbon can address 5 of the 9 planetary boundaries and that are being transgressed at the moment. And, we went, okay, that means these co-benefits are just as important as the next. So what we want is for you all to rank them for maximizing the collective benefit, right? So think about what is the most important to deliver the most benefit to the most people.
Are you allowed several answers or one answer?
I think you're allowed several try. Right, it's ranking, so.
Okay.
And I would say non-human living beings.
Yeah, it also, it does, but
So while we're doing that, I would love to, I mean, the panel is also filling this out.
Oh, yeah. Am I allowed? I don't think I'm allowed to vote on my own.
No, don't do that.
No, I'm not. No, you can. I can't, because I have to analyze it.
It's anonymous again, so.
It's true. Okay. So the reason that we put this in place and the reason we made this assumption is that essentially, to me and to us, if you manage to address basically all the boundaries with the exception of climate change, then you will get mitigation out the end anyway. That for us, the mitigation was a consequence of a change in the way things are done, in the relationship, not just between, humans, which a lot of the questions after this will be about. These are social questions. But this one was also about what are the right relationships between humans and all the other organisms. And I hope that the first examples of the farms gave you a good view of the kind of relationships that we're talking about. When these are orchestrated, the outcomes are not linearly predictable.
And I see some of the results here, and I would love to ask you, Kellyanne, from your background, and we'll get the mic, not what did you vote, because then we're making the study unscientific.
No.
Yeah, click one, yeah, you're up. What do you see with corporates, what do you see with your work, with your hat, let's say, on, as the ones that, let's say, resonate the strongest? That has changed over time, for sure. You come from, but like, what now? We're talking 26. Sure. What resonates?
I am going to tell you what I voted, because I actually didn't vote climate change. And I might have been biased a little bit by watching those beautiful farms on the screen first and thinking, that's kind of land that I want to drive by or ride by on my bike. But from a corporate perspective, I mean, they have their disclosures, so top is going to be climate change, right? And I think as they have more kind of disclosure frameworks to report on, the TNFD or the CSRD requirements, then you'll start to see more of the water impact or biodiversity, which is, which right now maybe sits within the regenerative agriculture targets.
You're saying maybe the biodiversity in the water will be sort of decoupled from the regen target and come into the climate change?
It will be in the disclosure frameworks that are addressing more metrics than, or looking at more metrics than just climate change. So they want to understand the impact on the land. And those are disclosures like required disclosures like CSRD, or voluntary ones like TNFD or TCFD.
We're playing acronym bingo here.
Yeah, sorry.
Does anybody have the card full already?
But the primary metric is going to be
climate.
Carbon.
In the interest of time, we're going to go to the next one. Sorry.
We thought 90 minutes was a lot, but it's not. We'll bring in food here. We'll just do lunch here. Next one is up almost. We go to 2.
All right, assumption 2. No, next. Oh, I can change it.
You can click.
Yay.
Yes.
Assumption 2. Okay. So essentially, we did, from the software point of view, we're looking at the software design of the software ecosystem.
The next one is coming up in a second. I see it's not up on the phone yet. Next assumption. And a shout out for the amazing cartoon graphics. Ish spent a lot of time yesterday evening doing that.
All right, the question's up. Great. Sorry, we're toggling between the two. It's interesting. But good job, Bea. Thank you in the back. So in the software ecosystem design, we assumed that the design itself and how these different modules work together should be driven by the sector which could benefit the most. Our assumption was the farming sector would benefit the most, and then everybody would benefit the most. But, what do you think, right? Because what we think is our assumptions. But we must test these. So, oh, great, it's up.
These are 2 questions, right? Yeah.
Yes, this one has 2 questions, so we stay on this slide.
Yeah, so I see a lot of votes. I see them live coming in. Thank you, Kellyanne. Place, a lot of people. Oh, landscape.
Oh. 6 is a mistake.
Ignore option 6.
Can I vote for option 6? No.
Yes, somebody did it there. Sorry, as we said, this is a first time. So place and landscape clearly on top. I think it's more than 80% if you would count it on each other. And then, how do I see the second question? Switch. Oh yeah, sorry. We're collecting, we're at 20, no, we're still, one is voting. The next one. And who should drive the system design? So we establish who should benefit, sort of, but now who should actually design the system? Which is not necessarily the same group. Hence this question. Probably government, yeah, 6. So we didn't leave out government on purpose and policy, but probably government is number 6, just saying. But we didn't want anybody to vote for that. No, I'm joking. So again, it's placed, that's very, because it touches up something, John, you said as well, like how do you interact with society and society at large? And what we see often, the most, I mean, it's a miracle we have Matteo here with your full agenda and all the places you're being pulled to, and John as well. Like the leading regen farmers don't necessarily have the time or the space or the compensation to be in these discussions and to be part of the next roundtable and the next brainstorm. So all of us be very conscious of when you ask that is to how to enable that to happen. And there needs to be funding for that. There needs to be compensation. And EARA does it to a certain extent. There's lobbying, but it's very easy to ask, oh yeah, we should have a farmer on board to help design this. Great. How do we make that actually happen on a consistent, like one show up is of course great, but to be consistently part of designing something like this takes a lot of time. And that means time away from the farm.
That was the key reason why on our farm we created the community interest company, is to find a way of actually bringing a new income into the farm, to recognize that a lot of what I do, a lot of what my son does is actually beyond what you would normally do as a food producer. And it's about engaging with society. And I think it's the one thing that society actually hasn't got right, is how do you allow people like us to engage in public debates and in policy development and in science development too.
Okay, I think we are ready for the next assumption, if enough people have answered. Yeah, you got to be quick.
You can click as well.
I can click?
For us, yeah. Number 3.
This is the question, but could we go to the slide because we need the assumption first? Yeah.
Wow, this is amazing back and forth in the back, by the way. This is not easy.
Thank you, Bea.
Thank you, Beatrice.
You're the best.
Okay, the assumption.
All right, the assumption that we made was essentially recording quantified carbon on a registry will be a shield for landholders from exploitative risks, and that it would support a just transition. Now, hopefully you realize how big these assumptions are. So, yes, hence why we're testing. But we must make them when we conceive of, okay, maybe if we were to win the project, how would we approach these problems? We must make these assumptions. So here we are, facing up to our own assumptions and asking you to correct us. So could we please go to the slide, Obeya?
Yes. So an open carbon registry, just like we have on land titles, but on the carbon side of things.
So what I want is one word that tells me, or a few words, which co-benefits you would like to see monetized. You can put as many as you like, as you care to put.
Very interesting how water and biodiversity surface. Forest fire prevention, of course, depending on where you are, that's absolutely probably not for John yet, hopefully. And nobody's writing carbon, which is Yeah, we've definitely set you up to not think about carbon. Amazing.
I mean, I think this is fascinating because it goes for me, if I look at my soil, what do I want for my soil? Well, my soil delivers 5 functions. And it's really difficult as a land manager to pick one over the others. And you know, this reflects, I want water cycling, biodiversity, soil health, resilience, productivity. I want all of that simultaneously. So for me as a decision maker on my farm, I don't have the luxury to pick an individual function. I need to deliver across the functions of soil.
Package, yeah. They're all linked, and it's sort of that spider one. Like if you pull too much on one, it might be that you're over optimizing, and and you have something like that, John. Oh, we're gonna go to another, but I know a story of your 250-year-old forestry system. Your great grandfathers planted probably, and grandmothers, and now it's suffering because there was no animal integration. Can you briefly, then we go to the next one because this is too good not to.
So I'm very much involved in the policy debate about land use change, and we're predominantly livestock farmers, and where we come from, livestock is our culture. We produce an awful lot of vegetation that ruminants can ruminate on, and but we are to a certain extent made to feel that we're the pariah of society because we have these belching animals. But what is quite interesting, when we set out 3 years ago, I just was nervous. We were seeing a lot of diseases coming into our long-term deciduous woodland, like ash dieback. And everyone said, well, it was a fungal attack. And I said, well, I used to be an agronomist. There must be a link to the soil. So we have done a detailed analysis on our biological health of our soils. And what we've found in earthworm populations and soil respiration is under our long-term woodlands, our soil pH has collapsed. We have not an earthworm defined, and our soil respiration is really low. And we are now working on a hypothesis. We're actually beginning to put animals and lime into our trees and putting trees into our grazing ground. And we're converging from 2 either ends to find, actually, what did my ancestors do? We had trees and animals coexisting. And people forget that the most important thing about animals is the feces they defecate, because it inoculates the microbiome of the soil. And you know, where we look to take animals out of the landscape, we have to think about how do we inoculate the soil microbiome. There has to be a halfway house there.
Nice.
Next one.
Okay, this one's spicy. I hope you're ready.
Click.
Bea, could you change to the next question, please?
And click on the next slide, maybe, as well.
No, there's 2 on this. Yeah. This is who, if it's up yet, who should have the authority to control the system? So we're talking about software, data, everything, just the system.
Yeah, we're making you work this morning. And maybe click on the next slide, Ish. You can click through here as well, so we get it here. Oh. Yeah, but then we don't see it.
But on this screen, it just does
At least, yeah, at least I see the voice.
No, we are still in this market invitation. That's good. Okay. We still have 6 people typing, so we are going to wait a moment. But essentially, it's...
Your mic is off.
Yeah, I think just like option 6 should have read government, this one should have been word cloud. So like I said, this is the first time we've done it. Feedback welcome.
Bear with
live
us.
also. Yeah. Let me see. EU governance body. No one. Government. Government with farmer and community board. That's a good one. Cooperation. There's AI.
Somebody said AI.
Oh, don't trust.
The blockchain came back a few times.
Not government. People. Government. Yeah. Okay. Well, this one we're gonna have to analyze. Two more people typing. Quick, quick, quick. No, 3 typing. What are you doing? It's going back up. Quick, 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 quick. Okay, we can go back to the slides and test our assumption number 4. Okay. Now, is it reading up? Yeah. Okay, assumption number 4. I mean, it's what the title says. Essentially, in technology, we trust. Yeah, the Slido's catching up. Give it a moment. So the assumption is that essentially highly technical open source solutions such as will establish transparency, fight greenwashing, and build trust. Very big assumptions. So of course we have questions to ask you about that assumption from the open source approaches. So if we could switch to the Slido on the main screen, please, for assumption number 4. And we have 2 questions, I think, under 4 to do. Okay. Not a word cloud. I take the feedback. Next 2 are also listing. Legal stuffs. So we have a new format. We're all convening on our mobile phones for consensus, including the panel. We've gone to assume the tech development is solved. What other ingredients are required to maximize the collective benefits? So farm agencies, good. Transparency, garbage in tech, garbage out, yeah. Data quality, I assume that is. Yep. Transparency. Well, I have questions about what needs to be transparent. Governance structures, transparent. It's all transparency. We need to talk about transparency. Okay. All right. We have one more person typing, so.
And some concerns, actually, about will the data be used as a stick for farmers?
Yeah. Yeah. So can I throw this one back to Kellyanne? Transparency, from your time in corporate land.
Like there's a mythical land of corporates.
Course.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on where you are in the value chain, right? Because most of where I sat in the value chain, we didn't even know where our farmers were. So I don't think there was a lot of control of farmer data necessarily, but I see it from the perspective of insurance companies and banks, that's not something you'd want to share, but the farmers probably have more to say about that.
There's a lot of assumptions here that farmers will actually let their data flow. And, for me, and I speak to my peers, is a lot of farmers don't have trust in the supply chain above them. Some do. Some are on vertically integrated contracts. Some are absolutely horizontal and are not. And for us, the thing that we're looking at is creating a permissioning center so that every time a request comes for, say, scope 3 declarations or whatever, is that request comes to the data gatherer, but they send then a permissioning request to the farmer, and the farmer has the final say who gets to see their data and who doesn't. And unless you do that, you won't build the trust, and they will not sanction a data to flow.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Do you want to give them?
I can share. So that being said, there is a lot of talk about then outcome payments. But ultimately, outcomes are data that show an improvement.
So I think for me there are two issues here. There are metrics and then there's data from those metrics, okay? So for an outcome-based, I want to make sure that the right metrics are being measured in the first place for that data to flow. The second thing is quite a lot of farmers don't own their own data, okay? And we have, certainly where I come from in Northern Ireland, our government owns an awful lot of our data, but we have agreed with our minister at the moment that actually, if you want to access that publicly held farmers' data, you still need to ask the farmer. And it's about issue of trust and transparency. And ultimately, this either fails, sinks or swims if you convince farmers there's trust in the system. And I will say trust and transparency are absolutely fundamental before farmers will let their data flow.
Matteo?
You want to, yeah, I was going to ask.
Matteo, do you have a point of view you wish to share or no?
I think I agree with John. Yeah.
Okay, great. Bea, could you please lead us to the next Slido question, which is finally perfectly timed with this discussion. So, exactly, it was totally planned. So, as scientists, can we see it up there? Yes. We love tech and we love data. Very nice. We're comfortable with it. So, what ethical concerns should be prioritized in our interactions, so I'm speaking from a science point of view, with farmers? And I'll remind you again, care principles, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, ethics. And the reason that we use these principles is essentially they were the best ones we could find from all the ones that we scanned that respected the primary issues found from place-based people, farmers, land managers, etc. Ironically, not really. Okay, what are we getting? Oh, we have a lot of people typing. Thank you. Anonymity. Anonymity. Tell us why. Oh, it's a good one. Control, ownership, data ownership, transparency, long-term storage and use. Long-term storage and use is an interesting one. One of the things we do as Open GeoHub is we rescue legacy data that's, you know, sitting on hard drives, rotting away, printed in papers, etc. There's a lot of information that's been collected and is actually lost. All right, ability to exploit. Pragmatism evident. Okay, farmers want to be paid for their data. It's a fair point. Along the journey. Very nice. We still have 5 people typing. Do we have any reflections or questions from the audience? You're most welcome.
Any reflections on my left or questions from the audience?
Thank you. Because I'm not really in this field. It's relatively new to me. And thinking about data, about farms, about regenerative agriculture, I was thinking, is anonymity really allowed in a sense? Because we need to know who is doing what and what they're doing and what works and what doesn't work. So anonymity, I would say, would be the best guarantee that the data is used not against the farmer, but at the same time, is it then really useful?
I mean, I just want to answer quickly from a procurement perspective, because procurement is costed by, you know, activities that the firm does and how much that's going to cost and the margin on top of that. So I would say if there's transparency on that, that the farmer maybe only has 1 or 2 outlets to sell to, that they'll kind of use that against, not against them, but, well, I don't, you know, they'll use that data to determine cost. They do already.
There's data gatherers and data gatherers. I mean, if you try and go to John Deere and get the data out of your tractor, you'll pay through the nose for it. you know, so there's a lot of data being gathered on farms that farmers actually haven't requested it be gathered. And then when you do go seeking for it, you have to pay a license fee, you have to pay X, Y, and Z. And actually, a lot of farmers really beginning to begrudge that. You know, data gathering is constructive when used properly and used as a management tool to inform better decisions, which is why I get involved in data gathering. But if I can't control who is gathering the data on my farm, then I have a problem. And that breaks my trust.
Okay, thank you, Mate. Welcome to come in if you wish, or... Okay. Oh, it's going to be a doozy when it comes. Okay, could we go back to the slides for a moment, please? And we will do assumption number 5. It's the second last one. You guys are doing great, by the way. Thank you for your participation. Do we have it up? Right. Okay, assumption number 5. Sovereign data is desirable. So essentially, we are assuming farmers and managers would prefer granular control over data from their own lands. We're not getting into specifics of exactly
It's still
who
coming. We're
owns.
still on 4. Yeah, Slido's
Slido's catching
up. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so that's our assumption. It's a preferable thing. We go from there. Now, if we could go to the Slidos for assumption 5, would be fabulous. Thank you.
Yes.
What comes to mind when we say sovereign data? This is a messaging and a naming question. Is it a term we can use? Is there a better term for it? It's difficult to communicate this concept. When I talk about licensing, when I say open access data, people will think most often it's free and available for everyone. And in reality, what it is very specifically licensed data where it's clear what you can do with it and what you can't. So in that sort of world, the license is critical, but this is a nuance that is sector specific, right, or specialties specific. So we've been using this term, sovereign data. Does it mean anything to you? Is there a better one? John already told me it what?
I don't know what it means.
Yeah, which is a valid response. We're searching for how do we name this term.
I'm obviously a very slow, backward, uneducated farmer.
So we see ownership clearly popping up in 3 different forms, basically.
Yeah.
So that's key. I mean, I think of sovereign wealth funds, but that's maybe more my investor hat.
Yeah.
Food sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Food sovereignty.
Food systems that
Yeah.
implies control.
Yeah, so control. Okay, so the context on the word sovereign and sovereign data, it actually comes from many years of interactions with countries and working with restricted country data sets, particularly in the developing world, where it's really important to them that their data is used in global models and is respected and is not just flung out in the world as a plaything. They care deeply. And that's why, that's where the word comes from, sovereign data, sovereign decisions. I'm hoping we can transfer it to the farmer level, but maybe not.
So what is coming to my mind is that I'm more into ecology. Before being a farmer, I'm more into ecology. And I think we always, or very often, forget that especially with policies and laws and so on, we tend to either generalize and homogenize the potential outcomes of the processes. And I do believe that we have really to learn and mimicry the successful behaviors of natural evolution, which is based on not just linear outcomes, but on 4-dimensional outcomes. So I believe that as a micro farmer, a small farmer, a medium farmer, a big farmer, and a huge farmer, or a multinational farmer, will answer completely different to many of these questions. So I do believe that what we need is at least 3 dimensions. And I think 3 dimensions is not even enough. Because as a farmer, I would answer in a way. as a consultant and educator, maybe in some other ways. In some contexts, I think it's necessary that the data are protected. In some other contexts, I think it's important that data are free, because precious data will come from a very small amount of farmers, because most of the pioneer farmers and the early adopters are the ones that will do what they do with a higher level of quality. All the rest, it will be replication or scaling, and you lose little by little quality of processes. So I really believe that we need to expand and adapt to specific bioregional contexts, as well as farm types, as well as, I will give you a small hint on this. I'm starting to speak with the farmers I'm consulting that before taking soil samples or SAP analysis or satellite imagery, I'm asking them, look, let's do a GAT analysis. Because once we know the microbiome of the farmer and what is lacking, we know how the farmer will behave on change, on transitioning, on how much energy, willpower, fear, or courage will have to start a transition towards agroecology or regenerative agriculture and so on. I mean, I know this is extreme, but we are speaking about simplifying or complexifying. I do believe that we need complex answers, and we know it is not just about carbon, it's more complex than this.
So just to repeat, you have got how do the farmers respond is a whole different discussion, that you, before you consult or before you go deep in the farm, you actually analyze the farmer or the farming family. And it's something EARA wants to do, I think, to look at the health. They brought an amazing report out, but look at the health of the farmer family, versus some of, like, let's say they have children, versus some of the families in the school class of the children, just to see also on human health the effect. I saw a question there, and we have still one or two questions, and so I want to make sure we end up on time as well. Do we move, or do we go to the question in the back?
Well, we're just bringing up the next Slido question. You can work on your answers. This is assuming we should go to that question,
yes.
But also in the meantime, we're assuming the data sovereignty is granular. Who would you trust? You can give and withdraw consent. Who would you trust? And then please,
yes.
Questions. It's always welcome.
I will go up.
Thank you. I have a question that links to the question that was asked earlier about the anonymity of the data, and then the response to that was, can you hear me well? Yeah, okay. Don't you think that we should distinguish between different types of data? What are we gathering data for? Because you gave the example of a private company that makes machinery and they want the ownership over their data because it has a competitive advantage of having that data, right? They don't want to share that with everyone. Makes sense in the system that we find ourselves in. When it comes to the data on farms, I understand that it's usually private land, and so it's privately owned, and so I understand there's a feeling that this data belongs to me, it's my land. But all of that data links to things that I would call public goods. It's the health of our soils, the health of our rivers, our ecosystems, our biodiversity. So I do feel there is a difference, and I feel there should be a public mandate for being able to gather that data so that we have a clear picture of the state of our environment, even though the land is maybe owned and managed privately. I would like to hear your thinking on that.
So
thank you.
On my farm, we open our farm every year. We participate in what we call Open Farm Weekend, and we put all our environmental data on storyboards, and we let people come. That's a decision we have made, but we have control of that decision. And I want to tell the world actually what we do. I've nothing to hide. But that's probably because I'm in the top half of farmers in my community, okay? And we're very passionate about it. There are other there is IP in farmers' data, and how they, and there is a lot of suspicion in the supply chain. If your retailer is buying directly, do you want to totally expose your knowledge in there because they get to know your cost model? And then when you go for your annual negotiation with that retailer, they know you've got no tricks left. You've exposed yourself. So there is a different, I think it's a very good question of being in, sharing your environmental journey to sharing your economic journey. And I am more open to sharing my environmental journey than my economic journey.
Interesting.
I see other questions in hands, but let's also keep going because we want to make sure we finish them. Or Ish, you have your mic is off.
All right. So have we...
My moderating hat wants to get through 6.
So we skipped over the last one, but essentially it said that all the data sovereignty is very granular, and who would you trust? And apparently scientists and researchers. But then we also hear from environmental data, not necessarily economic, which is a very interesting
Kellyanne
division.
mentioned that before as well. As soon as you expose your cost structure, you will be played. Like there's no question, unless you sell everything direct. Unless, I mean, we've seen amazing CSA market gardens which actually share their cost structure and say you can pay more if you want. A friend of ours does that, and people do. But it's a very different dynamic than you're selling your milk into a milk powder or your grain. Or so I think there's the dimensions of Matteo was mentioning before. Like it depends your size and where you sell to, what you actually want to share, because the power structure is what it is in your context. Okay.
Okay, we have a bit of a word cloud, thankfully, instead of a list going on. This is essentially, OGCR wants to maximize farmer returns over several generations. We see an issue with the timing of returns. This is an economic question, and we do see it as barrier. So our aim is long-term returns, and my question for all of you then is, what is the most important thing that we have to get right with the farmer data sovereignty to maybe try and help this to happen, to have this long-term view? I know there's bills to pay today, tomorrow, etc., but this short-termism in the economic model appears to be in need of some additional ways of making money over longer term. Can I give it to the money people who know more?
It always baffles me that we have figured out a way to, I mean, we've set up pension funds and sovereign wealth funds and governance structures, and we're funding renewable energy projects which take 30 plus years to, and that's fine. And then when we get to agroforestry systems, suddenly we don't know how to do that, which is just, I mean, a lot of solar panels on a tree just to be, and so it's very, we absolutely know how to do that and to governance very long term. We haven't really brought that to land use in many places. Some places, of course, we have, indigenous peoples have, but like, let's say the modern financial system hasn't figured out how to put a tree on a spreadsheet yet. And I think it should, with all the issues of fitting in a box, obviously. But we can. There's no reason why things should be short term. Like the 10-year fund, if you're an investor, the 7+3 is just it's an invention for software. It doesn't mean we cannot go 20, we cannot go evergreen, we cannot go several generations. There's no reason.
Yeah, I find this very interesting. And as a scientist, my financial literacy is always limited, it seems.
But I will push back. For me, the long-term issue is the intergenerational issue. You know, what right have I got to tie the hands of my children, my grandchildren, in a family farm unit? So, you know, the time scale, time length of a contract is something that emotionally actually can tear up a farming family if you've got 3 different generations there.
Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
which actually brings a huge, not issue, challenge, let's say in the next decade or so, as many farmers are reaching retirement age in Europe and US, are already at retirement age, are pushing beyond. So what are the and maybe don't have the, not luxury, but the next generations lined up in that sense. How we're going to transition that? That's hundreds of billions of dollars and euros of farmland that has to transition to the next generation that wants to get in, but isn't lucky enough to be born on the farm. And there's a lot of work to be done there. Land stewards, you're doing it here. There's a lot of work in Europe being done around it, but I don't think if you look at the data of how many farmers will retire in the next 5 years in Europe, it's pretty scary. Huge opportunity as well to build things, but it's like the amount of land that has to change hands. It shouldn't go to the neighbor that necessarily is going to be even bigger. It's an interesting one to juggle with.
If we could go to the last assumption, please, back to the slides. It's the last time we're going to do this awkward transition. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for bearing with us and participating as well. So is it up? Yes. OK. Essentially, assumption number 6, and Slido will catch up in a moment,
Yes.
is that equitable economic value or distribution of economic value is possible. So we are assuming open data and public benefit infrastructure for co-benefits will enable the equitable distribution of economic value over time. Again, massive assumption. We have to make them. Big leaps, it's research, let's go. But now, everyone's seen the cartoon, hopefully. It's very important. If we could...
I'm glad to say I'm not trusted. I trust no one.
Yeah. So now what essentially we're asking if we can see the Slido on the big screen. It's the last 3 questions that we have, and we should be finishing on time. So
Yes.
Yes.
I know we still have a question out there. We're going to make it work.
Fine.
So we see the results up, and then we should move. We have 2 more questions, right?
Who do you trust in the long term to manage carbon? Right? So again, following the CARE principles, right? So yeah, okay, I trust no one.
Yeah, there's definitely a trust issue.
But I mean, my problem with this question is that actually I'm building soil on my carbon, not, carbon in my soil, not because I want to monetize it, but because it builds climate resilience in my landscape. You know, my biggest driver on my farm is how do I cope with the extreme weather events, and that is really focusing my mind at the moment.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, really, to agree with John, but also to say that I've been listening over the last day and a half now, and for farmers, I chaired a session yesterday of farmers on carbon farming, and I asked them the question, would they carry on with the practices they'd adopted, even if there was no money to pay for them? And they all said yes, because they have recognized that those practices are helping them with extreme weather events. And then that led me to think about, well, who is it then that wants us as farmers to somehow hand over our carbon to them? I'm saying somehow. And it feels like and I am a farmer, by the way, it kind of feels like there's other actors that need to be able to report on their supply chain emissions reductions or carbon removals to help them. And actually, somehow they need it more than farmers do. That's where I'm left.
I just want to comment on that because actually, from a value chain perspective, the farmer will own that carbon and the value chain reports it, but they don't own it. So it's a very different concept than selling offsets. They just need to report it. That doesn't mean they own it. It just means that it's scope 3, it's in their value chain. And I think we can come up with mechanisms where farmers can lease the right for reporting that carbon in the value chain without selling it as an offset.
Let's go to the next.
Just to add a little bit of context to the last comment about selling or not selling carbon, one of the assumptions that we made, but we didn't put in here, about maximizing the value to landholders over time was that not all carbon is the same, okay, but for what is labeled the temporary carbon under CRCF, this carbon, as soon as you sell the actual asset as an offset, it becomes a liability. It converts. And these are never good relationships. Whenever I've seen them, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't sign that. I'm not doing that. So, GCR, we are looking at numerous ways, and Kellyanne is spearheading with the technical nerds, because she understands this far better than me, ways that we can get economic value to the landholder continuously through time. So then we can also avoid this issue of the intergenerational tension. Because it is, if you upfront ex ante trade your promises for however long, well, I want to know the other side. What is the liability? What is the risk? Because we haven't seen good things from buffer pools and stuff like that, you know? The voluntary market has given us a long list of things not to do.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Are we not hypocritical in here in isolating the farmers and demanding data from them on the environment in particular, when really they are not the only one who are extracting resources from the soil, okay? And we are not demanding the same things to the people who are extracting minerals, or people who are exploiting oil, or people who are exploiting other materials for the benefit, forestry in particular, who are exploiting really the soil in exactly for the same benefit, which is for private enterprise. And then suddenly we're asking a lot for the farmers, and we're saying you are slightly different to anybody else because really, actually why? So I think really to me is that we need also to think about this relationship of data sharing aspect of it. And the best example I find is, I know I can see capitalism in here. Tesco. Tesco actually has done something really right. So a big retailer in the UK. And what they do is they are saying to the consumer, I'm going to gather the data through the club card, but I'm going to, in return, give you back a discount. Okay, and it's all transparent, but I'm going to be able to sell this data, and it's a transaction, and it's opened. The people are prepared really to share their information in order to get this. And for some reason, we're isolating the farmer, and we say, well, you need to give us all the data. It needs to be open source. It needs to be, and that's my question is, are we just making too much demand on farmers and without really having them to voice really what is right or wrong?
Which is a very fair question, which we're going to tackle in lunch, I think, because we are at time. I'm gonna. We can do a bit. Did we collect enough data, Ish? It's a big question. That's my rabbit hole fear. Have we wrapped up with a slider? We also want to give people time to get to. Have we wrapped up?
Can I say a few?
The ones we want, and then we can go to John, and we'll put a.
Then we wrap up.
When we wrap up, and
I think where farmers feel exposed, for the farmers who get public money, there is an inference that public money comes with strings on it. There are some farmers, of course, who don't take any public money. And so certainly for farmers in the subsidized sectors, I think there is that implicit, you will, farm by good agricultural practice, you will share your public goods as such. And it's like even at home, Stefan, you go in to our soil nutrient health scheme, that's free. But if you want to get any agri-environmental payments, you have to be in the scheme and you have to be prepared to share your data.
You made a contract then?
Yeah.
It's a contract.
Yep.
Matteo, any closing words, thoughts, if you want?
I think it's not an answer to this very complex question. I think something that I feel is lacking to the system, we are thinking in a very mechanistic way, and I think we are forgetting about culture, which was the base of agriculture land management in the past. We lost common sense. We lost the capacity of mixing data's mechanics with philosophy and culture and will for our species to survive on this planet. So I really believe that we need, as farmers, as consumers, as anybody, to reinforce the, doesn't come the word, the opportunities that will allow us to co-create a new culture, a new shared landscape management culture.
And I don't think we can wish for better words to wrap us up. Anything you want to say, Ish?
Promotional. You have a flyer. On the back is a QR code.
And
Please,
some
and some
crayons.
details. Please really do sign up. There is a lot of resources and effort being put to proper stakeholder consultation and hearing, and that will continue. So please, if you have something to say, we do collate it. We do look at it all. We do anonymize also, unless you wish to be on the record for it. And we also seek to share learnings with our sister project, CAFAMOR. So we are sort of trying to join our forces there a bit so that we can share learnings across, right? Please participate.
With that, thank you so much.